Some call them lunchtime lifesavers. Others call them the most perfect sandwiches to ever exist. At Zaxby's, we just call them our signature fan favorites. The Southern TLC Filet Sandwich has hand-breaded chicken with fresh tomato and crisp lettuce. The famous Kickin' Chicken Sandwich features spicy tongue torch and Cool Ranch sauces. And for a limited time, fried pickles are back. 2 classic sandwiches and a legendary appetizer. 3 more reasons you're gonna get a kick out of Zaxby's.
From Tally to Cali,
It's time
to wake up.
wake up, wake up. WarChant.com is your ultimate Seminole sports source.
and this is Wake Up War Chant, presented by Zaxby's
Now here's WarChant.com's Aslan Hajavandi.
and Corey Clark.
Wake up! What's up, everybody? It's Wake Up War Chant, proudly presented by Zaxby's Indescribably Good. I'm Aslan Hajavandi, joined by Corey Clark, senior writer for WarChant.com, the ultimate Seminole sports source. Use the promo code WarChant30 for 30 free days of access to aforementioned website. Corey Clark in the greater Atlanta area. I'm in Tallahassee. Lots of crazy stuff going on this weekend, but we're not going to talk about any of that. We're going to just live in a bubble. We're going to live in a bubble where the only thing we talk about is sports, Corey. That's all we're going to do. We're going to stick to sports. We're going to do what everybody wants. We don't want to upset anybody. Couple commitments this past weekend, sort of-ish, Friday. We'll have Michael Langston on the show later to break that down. So look in the item description for the time code if you want to skip ahead and listen to Michael. Anywho, Corey, it sounds like you just got done wrapping up your lunch. We're recording this a little bit earlier than usual on a Sunday because the Lance Armstrong documentary is dropping and can't miss that.
Right. Yeah. Everybody, the whole country is kind of glued to their TVs to see the second part of the Lance documentary.
Yeah, man.
Seems like a really likable dude, right?
Yeah, I never got all the way behind it. I mean, my buddy gave me the Livestrong band. I wore it because it was cool. It was yellow. Yellow's a flattering color on my skin tone. I didn't get too. I wasn't too much into like anchoring.
I mean, I wasn't either.
there.
And in fact, I thought the whole time. I understood the story, and coming back from cancer is awesome. But he won like AP Athlete of the Year like 5 years in a row.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember complaining at the time that there wasn't Twitter, so I was just basically yelling at a cloud. But I'm like, what are we doing here? He's a cyclist. Like, he's not that. If we're talking about the best athlete, I mean, I get it. We give it to him the first time he won the Tour de France. But every year after that, we're going to give it to him again because he can ride a bike fast. And we all know he's cheating because everybody in that sport cheats. So I just thought it's like, what all of a sudden Americans care about cycling? Oh, wait, we don't anymore because there's not a good American in it. Like, you know what I mean? Once Lance went off the landscape, do we care about it at all anymore? No. But for that 7-year window, the whole world cared about it. I just thought it was way overblown how much of I don't know. He was great. I guess he was a great cyclist even before he started doping compared to other non-doping cyclists. But we all knew he was cheating. We all knew it. And he took all those people to court and said awful things about him. Plus, he looked like a complete kind of jackhole. Even when he was like 17, all the stuff in that the first part.
Yeah.
He didn't come across as real likable. He never came across as real likable. And so, yeah. Anyway, I don't know why we're talking about Lance Armstrong, other than for me, I finally get to amplify my thoughts on him from 15 years ago.
Oh, man. Well, it was either that or I was going to talk about college football fight songs. Because I was listening to some before I was waiting for you to hop on. I feel like they're all iconic. Like I was trying to, I was listening to all the ones in the SEC. I'm like, man, I'm not a big fan of, I didn't, I don't know. I don't want to besmirch the good name of the University of Georgia in Athens, but I wasn't a big Georgia fan. But I was listening to Glory Glory for the last few minutes. I liked it. And like,
it's a good jam, right?
What's like what's the law that it's called when you stuff over time? And then you can start talking about, like, if you commit a
statute of limitations.
There we go. There's my guy.
Yeah.
There's that Georgia public school education showing its superiority over
right.
Florida. Like, what's the statute of limitations on tipping your cap to teams that have beat you in the past? Like, are people over the Tennessee game? Like, will anybody ever really be over losing to Tennessee? Like, I'm never going to ever say anything positive about the University of Florida. Like, it's just not going to happen. But, I kind of like Rocky Top. I don't know if I just admitted that. Maybe I'll edit it out of the show. I kind of like it.
Don't you think it has to do more maybe with the interactions with fans from that team,
Yeah.
or the way those players maybe conducted themselves after a win or a loss or however it may be. Like, I feel like Florida State fans, there are quite a few Florida State fans that probably hate Oregon more than they do Clemson.
Yeah. Right.
Like, just because of that one interaction and how snooty their stupid fan base was and the things their fan base was chanting and the glee they took in that win. It's like, you really have they're 2,500 miles apart. They have no history. That's the only time they've ever played. But yeah, I think a lot of Florida State fans to this day and maybe 20 years from now will still not like Oregon.
It sounded like you said 250 miles apart. I'm sure you meant 2,500. Maybe you did say 2,500, but in case you
I might have said 250 miles apart. Yeah, Oregon is just like inside the Alabama state line, right?
Right. It's right next to Trussville and Mobile.
That's where Eugene is. Yeah, it's in between Dothan and Trussville.
Yeah. I mean, we got a guy on the boards, Fear the Spear, who is just he's great. He just, like, every month he just drops this expose on Clemson. Like, if everything burns down in Clemson, bad choice of words, Aslan. If Clemson's program, football-wise, comes crumbling down at some point, Fear the Spear is going to have some sort of finger in the pot involved in that. He just brings these exposés every month about this is why Clemson's this is how they're getting away with things. This is how they're funneling cash. This is why they're beating us. We have to beat Clemson at all costs. And it's because he's in South Carolina, so I imagine he is surrounded by tiger paws and purple and orange, whereas me, and I guess your dad was from South Florida. I don't know if you got a little more skin in the game down there, but I guess maybe those Miami games in your formative years were just more crucial. I mean, so much more hinged on those games, at least in the late 80s. When the early 90s rolled around, both Florida and Miami, those games were obviously had huge sort of implications. But like for me, I don't know, just like, mid-90s is really when I came into loving and really appreciating college football. Miami was on the tail end of their dynasty and going on probation, so that game was kind of like a cakewalk, more or less. Still was a big game. You wanted to beat Miami, but like Florida, everything was Florida. And I think I was surrounded by more Florida fans in school. Like, I don't know. There's not a lot of Miami fans in the greater Tampa Bay area. And, like, I'll always carry the resentment and the angst towards Florida more so than Miami. Always. I just will. But anyhow, I'll never like their fight song. Either of those two.
I was going to say about, when I grew up, probably my worst interactions were probably with Miami fans, just because I went to the Orange Bowl, man. My dad was like, hey, whatever, we're going. Right. And so I was there for Wide Right 2, and I was there in 86. Wasn't there in 88, thankfully, for the 31-0 beatdown. But I was at a lot of Florida State Miami games, and remember, most of the times when it was close, Miami would find a way to win. And as you can imagine, and again, I get it, every fan base has them. But I was just introduced to more obnoxious Miami fans than any other fan base. Not through any real fault of their own. It's just I was there. Like, I was around 70,000 people in the Orange Bowl. So, of course, you're going to get some Miami fans that are nice, some that are, we're walking out of the stadium and somebody's yelling, all Florida State fans, please stay to the right. Please stay to the right. As we're walking out, and they're all, screw FSU and not so nice language. Right. So you met some really not nice people that would talk crap to like a 13-year-old. That's fine. It's fine. It's part of the deal. It's part of college football. But what should give Florida State fans great solace, or what gives me solace now when I look back, because those were painful times walking out of a stadium when you just lost a national championship by a point, is the fact that same dude, like the dude that was dancing around Bethia after the kick, man, what was the last really good time he had at a football game? You know what I mean? It's been 18 years since that program was of any note at all. They have not won a conference championship since they joined the ACC. They've only played for one. It has been a cavalcade of mediocre teams after each other in that city. In that city, really, when you count the Dolphins. So if you're a Dolphins/Hurricanes fan, you have not been able to enjoy the sport of football for almost 2 decades. And that should make every Florida State fan, that should put a smile on almost every Florida State fan's face. Because you won the long game.
Yeah. Well, they had that little, what was it, 17, where they're literally going to the last week of the season, like maybe, with playoff hinges and against Pitt.
They were like 2 in the country, right? 2 or 3 in the country. And they lost to Pitt. They got bulldozed by Clemson, right? Wasn't that what happened? They ended up losing 4 games that year.
Correct. And then they lost to Wisconsin. Alex Hornibrook The great Alex Hornibrook.
Hornswoggle. He owns Miami.
Well, okay. I mean, they might have taken the lead back from him, last November.
Guess he would have wanted one against him.
Yeah. All right, let's pivot and talk a little bit about the hot topic that will be posted on War Chant. And I don't know. I don't want to take too much of the gusto away from the write-up that we all did, a little roundtable discussion just about the fact that, again, things continue. And I don't want to say I hate to sound like a broken record because these are good things to keep talking about, but it just seems like there continues to be momentum behind the football season being played as scheduled. And again, maybe even at near capacity. I mean, I think Oklahoma State, I don't know if I sent that in the group text. I think Oklahoma State has gone on the record saying that they have, they have a plan in place if they have the ability, the green light, to be able to have full capacity at their stadium this season at some point. And I'm sure probably every school has a plan somewhere in their playbook that if this all works out and it goes away and transmission's not as easily done in outdoor settings, that, they want to hope that by the time, November rolls around that they're going to be close to full capacity. But we've already talked about fans in the stands. But again, it just feels, I don't know, is inevitable the right word? Because it never seems like it wasn't going to happen. But we remain, as every day passes, more and more bullish that things are going to be good for football fans in 2020. Do we not?
We do. Yeah, I think there's the momentum is clearly heading in that direction. We do think that. We do, I wonder, we wonder about the practice time, how they're going to do it. I talked to Stan Jones, actually. This is a different sport, but talking about basketball. And he said, as far as he understood, there's no official word yet, but that when basketball players are welcome back, they're going to have to be tested to be allowed into the facility. Everybody within, and then that'll be through like June 30th. And then after June 30th, maybe you go through a second phase where coaches are allowed in there to be voluntary workouts with them to do skill work and whatever. I think that the same will be, I think people are going to take it slow. It's going to be cautious, but steady, if that makes sense. I do think that it's a steady kind of march towards football opening on time. And all of this is with the caveat that if there's a huge flare-up and outbreak in this country, obviously, and we have to go back to being quarantined, then all bets are off. But right now, I don't know that that's going to be. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen. We'll see. I mean, all these states opened up about 2 weeks ago, and if you watch the news this past weekend, there were a lot of, people gathered together. Yeah. They're outside, so that helps. But we'll see what this country looks like in 2 or 3 weeks. But if it looks like it continues to look where it's a steady decline, not precipitous, but still steady, that you got to assume by late July, I feel like you're going to be a full go as long as the testing is in place to get these kids back practicing.
Right. And I think there's, I think Pete Thamel maybe reported it, but there's rumblings that the NCAA might provide 6 weeks of preseason camp training, however you want to label it, which I think, what is it usually? Like, what do you
It's 4 weeks. I think it's 4 weeks usually.
I don't know if it's like 15 like spring. I thought you get like 23 practices or something like that. And you can obviously spread them out however you want. Maybe, I don't know. Don't quote me on that. I should probably look it up. But what do you think about that number? Like 6 weeks, is that a good number, bad number? Is that like is it a happy medium, or will it ultimately not give Florida State and this first year staff enough time to, again, obviously they're not going to be able to do what they wanted to do in mind, but like, will 6 weeks provide enough of a runway for them to get this thing off the ground in a fairly sharp, crisp fashion, would you think?
Yeah, I think it gives them, I don't think you could do any more than 6 weeks. I mean, imagine 6 straight weeks of preseason football practice. Man, preseason football practice is the worst because there's no, it's not like you got the carrot at the end of the week where you get to play a real game on national television in front of fans. It's just straight hard work and a bunch of sweat for 6 weeks. So any more than that, I think you start to lose the team a little bit. Like you can't have that ratcheted up energy for 6 straight weeks without a game, or 7 straight weeks without a game, I should say. So I do think it gives them, if they use it correctly, which there's no reason they wouldn't, I think you use those first 2 weeks maybe as more of an extension of spring, where it's more like you're installing, but you're also evaluating. Because I think that's what you miss out on the spring a lot is they don't know really anything about these players yet. They can watch all the film they want, and they can they can even Zoom with them. But you don't know the player that you're dealing with until you're out on the practice field with him, watching how he works, watching how he takes coaching. And they really only got to coach for a day in full pads. So they still don't know who they can count on. They have no idea what the depth chart's going to look like, except for maybe at wide receiver at one spot in particular and on the defensive line. Because Odell at least knows those guys. But the new guys, man, I don't know that they got to know their guys over the course of offseason conditioning and then 3 spring practices, 2 of which were in shells. So I think you use those first 2 weeks of the preseason practice, if that's what would end up being, and I think that's a fair number. And I think it's fair. I think you should. I don't think it's fair to just say you don't get any. Everything is now preseason. You don't make any accommodations for what just happened in our country. I think you at least have to understand that those 2 extra weeks would be invaluable for all coaching staffs, but most importantly, one that's just come to a new program. So you use those 2 weeks as evaluation and install, and then those 4 weeks, the same. You're getting ready, you're sharpening, you're getting ready for that first game. I think 6 weeks is about as, to me, it seems about as fair as possible considering the circumstances. What do you think? Do you disagree with that?
Well, here's the thing. I wanted to almost flip it back and ask you a follow-up. By the way, 29. I don't know why. They just, why can't we do 28 or 20 or 30? But 29 preseason practices is what you were allowed, previously. So we'll see what they'll be able to do with 6 weeks. It's obviously 42 days. Pinellas County Education. What? Step up. I was going to kind of ask you about, is this 6 weeks created equally for everybody? Again, I think the Florida State staff, to your point, not having the spring, not really knowing their personnel, I mean, the 6 weeks, they're going to probably utilize it, I would think, somewhat differently than Ohio State and Oklahoma is. But, will they be able to make the best of the 6 weeks? Will it be a more valuable time for them than, because what Oklahoma and Ohio State and Alabama and Clemson have done for the last 5-10 years, the foundation that they've laid, they're at the top of the sport. I don't really know how much higher they can build their castle. I don't know how much closer they can get to the sun. They're practically there. So for that 6 weeks, I don't know if that's it's not enough time for them to really do something extremely complicated and extravagant and exotic and really have their army of guys in polo shirts and khaki pants pour over film. Meanwhile, that 6 weeks for Florida State, I just think they've got so much more ceiling that they can hit their head on that they'll be able to grow more. I would think that some of the other teams. I like the 6 weeks, and I think it's tough. And again, we kind of said this in our roundtable thing, and I hate to repeat myself, but if you haven't listened to both of them, you can just listen to the podcast. It's almost disingenuous to sit here and talk about this is going to be a benefit to Florida State. The fact that the spring practice got washed out and that everybody's in this kind of truncated, compressed timeline to get everything done. But you look at the schedule, look at these first few games. I think, do you agree or disagree with the fact that the limited amount of practice time is almost going to make you're going to lean on who's got the more talent's going to win out over coaching and scheme and things like that when you have less time to prepare. It's who is just more naturally talented than the other team. And we would think that Florida State probably has a better roster than West Virginia, Samford, and Boise State. And hey, you get 6 weeks to prepare for and essentially which is really 2 games, and then you get a bye week and the ACC schedule starts. So all that thrown together, I think, is ultimately kind of a net positive for Florida State, if that makes sense.
Well, it is. Yeah, sure. It's just that, these would have been the 2 weeks they would have used for the spring, and that they didn't get. So I think it's just the best of the alternatives, because, everybody's in the same boat with 6 weeks, but Florida State's got more to do. And at least that 2 extra weeks gives them 2 extra weeks to try to catch up. As opposed to, just, hey, everybody, it's the same exact preseason practice schedule we've always had, no changes to it. Even though you didn't get you got wiped out of basically an entire spring we're not going to make any adjustments or accommodations. That just wouldn't, to me, that wouldn't make sense. If you're able to do it, if you're able to get kids in there in the middle of July, which we're now talking about 6 weeks from now, and feel comfortable with it, I don't see any reason why you couldn't. Honestly, I just don't see any reason why you couldn't. And also, yeah, I think it would help Florida State. One thing that you didn't mention, but I know we all know about it, is also if you're thinking that your hotshot quarterback from Arizona might be starting on opening day, well, this gives them, they're all on even ground, man. He's 3 days behind them, and really 2 days behind Jordan Travis, because Jordan Travis didn't throw any balls the first day in pads. So when you look at it like that, you got 4 quarterbacks on even ground. Yeah. So if Chubb is going to win the job, he's got a much better chance of winning it now than he did if they would have had a full spring practice, in my opinion. And if they only had 4 weeks of practice, if everybody was thrown into the same boat, he gets that 2 extra weeks to try to catch up to what he might not have, what he might have gotten left behind with in the spring.
Yeah, I mean, I probably should have tackled that part of it first. Yeah, I do think with 6 weeks, you probably do use that first 2 weeks as a quasi-spring, fundamentals. This is the way we're going to practice. This is what we want to see in terms of rhythm and effort and et cetera, et cetera. I do wonder, though, now that you frame it that way, I hate to see, kids be disappointed that came to this university and had high expectations for themselves and their team and their teammates. I would hope that they would cut that competition down to 3 almost out the gate, though. Within that first 2 weeks, the first week, either hey, James, it's just not going to be you, or Jordan. Somebody, and I'm not saying that James Blackman's not going to be the guy, but it's hard enough when you've got 3 guys competing for a quarterback job, because ultimately, how many really good quality reps is the third team guy going to get? And I know you cycle them in with the ones and things like that, but for a lot of programs and coaches, it's seeing the way that they can elevate other players around them. But that's going to be another tough thing too. 4 guys that are legitimately all on even ground, I really would. They're obviously going to have a plan. They've encountered this before, but that's something I really didn't think about in terms of a variable that's going to be in play. So, right? That's tough, is it not, Corey? You got 4 guys, and you want to give all 4 of them a legitimate shot, so you have a real, true, honest look at them.
Well, yeah, but that's where the 2 weeks comes in handy. Yeah. After those first 2 weeks, you'll have a better idea of, okay, he's kind of not really in the equation much. Yeah. Out of these, you could anyway. And so he starts getting less reps, or he starts getting less reps with the ones. And maybe by week 4, you're down to 2 legitimate candidates. Yeah. I don't necessarily see that being the case, but it could be. But he structures his practice different anyway. I think they're all going to get much more reps than they were getting with the previous staff. But yeah, man, I just think that the 6 weeks, it's what I've always thought made the most sense anyway, because it gives you just a little taste of the spring practice back, but also you still get to implement and you still get to evaluate, and now you're evaluating with the whole team. I don't know how many early enrollees Florida State had. I guess I should, but it was a handful. Well, now you've got all the recruits. They're all on campus. So it's basically 2 weeks of spring practice, but with the entire team. So yeah, that's a positive. It's a positive for every school, but it does give Florida State a little. It helps Norvell out a little bit. Not nearly as much as a full spring would have helped him out, but it does help a new staff out at least a little bit to get those 2 extra weeks, if that happens. If it doesn't happen, this was just 10 minutes of pointless conversation. But hey, we're almost in the summer anyway, so that's what we're going to have, is a lot of pointless conversation.
Whoa, we be talking about what, the Knowles in Omaha right now, or in a regional?
I think they'd be going to a regional, or I think maybe a super regional, right? I think they would have just clinched going on their way to a super regional, probably to Gainesville, where they'd be playing Florida next week in a super.
I'm going to miss it. I do love college baseball. Well, all right. Well, is it worth...
You're going to miss that drive? You miss that drive out to Omaha again?
Oh, man. A little bit. So is it worth even talking about looking at the schedule? And I guess I kind of glossed over it a little bit, but just if you got 6 weeks, and you want to talk about using 2 of those as a quasi-spring, and you got 4 weeks of what usually would be your preseason camp, and then you've got game week to get ready for Boise. But when you think about, again, the importance of getting off to a good start, which has been the case for this program for the last 4 seasons, is hey, win the first game, or don't be out of the conference title picture by the end of September. That would be nice, please. But I mean, maybe I'm probably looking at maybe too macro and maybe not going down to a more granular. That's my new word for the month, which is over now. It's June 1st. Can you believe it? How did we make it this far? But like, yeah, you got 6 weeks, 9 if you really think about it, to prepare for Boise State and West Virginia. That's a lot of time, and I know they have a lot of work to do. And I don't want to totally gloss over Samford, but I just glossed over Samford because it's an FCS team, and I mean, you got to be able to beat a team like that, even with a little bit of distraction kind of swirling around your head. But yeah, I mean, just like I think Boise and West Virginia are in the same boat, especially West Virginia. Their staff's only been in place. This is their second season, so it's not like Neil Brown has really had a whole bunch of time to flip the roster and change the culture and all those kind of hot buzzwords. So again, it falls back to, I think you've got probably a better roster. And I know that's not the way football games are played out, but it's your offensive line versus their defensive line and vice versa, and your cornerbacks versus their wide receivers and vice versa. I look at it that way. I mean, like, I'm looking at, you have like 9 weeks to prepare for 2 games. And then you have an off week, and then against your conference slate starts. So there's a huge opportunity here for this staff to really show just how kind of cutting edge and cunning they can be, and crafty and all that kind of stuff or whatever, because the 6 weeks gives them that's a good window. And then you look at the way the schedule is set up, dovetailing into that, again, I'm 7.5 is still the right number, but I just think like the opportunity is here. This could have been really bad, and it still could work out to not be a good start for the staff. And I'm not going to totally judge them on, what happens on the field, because there are other things we need to factor in. But like, is it worth examining that at all? Like, is to look at the fact that the way the season's going to start with the 6 weeks of preparation, and it maybe, Florida State's not in as bad a shape as we would think?
Yeah, but I don't understand why you kept saying 9 weeks. What do you mean by the 9? They get 9 weeks of preparation.
Well, I mean, 9 weeks, maybe not for West Virginia, but like they got 9 weeks to get ready for Boise. I mean, you got 6 weeks of preseason, and you got 1 week of game week to get ready for Boise. I would say
West Virginia is more important than Boise, in my opinion. I think that's the most important game they're going to coach this year, or certainly in the first 4 or 5 games. I just do. I think if you come out and lay an egg after what the last guy did when he laid an egg, and that completely got everything off to the awful start. The players didn't believe in themselves. The fans didn't believe in the players and the coach. And they're like, what is this nonsense? And it just devolved from there. You got to play well in that first game. And so I wouldn't look at it as like Boise's the big game. I think West Virginia is the big game out of those first 3. Maybe even the first 4. I know NC State on the road, it's a conference game, but you're not winning the conference this year. Yeah. So, beating West Virginia would be such a welcome sight. And then you beat Samford. Oh, well, you're 2-0 for the first time since when? Jameis? I don't know. But
16? Or was North Carolina week 2? They beat Ole Miss, and then who they have week 2 in 2016?
Oh, and then they beat some. Yeah, and then they got beat by 1,000 by Louisville. So yeah, I guess 2016 was the last time they went 2-0, which is crazy. Come on, man. You're Florida State. Win your first 2 games. Win your first game. Quit all this nonsense.
Well, Alabama was the first game one season, so,
Well, yeah, but then Virginia Tech and Boise, that's not a murderer's row.
Right.
Both those teams aren't incredible, but you found a way to get blown out by one and then, get blown out in the second half by the other. So figure out a way. West Virginia is on the same level as Boise and Virginia Tech, in my opinion. Similar, like all around the top 20, 25-ish type schools if they're having a decent season, but nothing special. So go beat them. But yeah, I do think that this is an incredible challenge. But I think that, I just think I'm sold on this guy. I think he has a plan in place. He's been working on a plan. I just have confidence that he's been working on a plan.
So Corey, what you're like Kendall Roy, like you've read both plans and Dad's plan is better. Is that what you're trying to say? Like Norvell's plan is better?
From Succession.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly right. No, I have faith in that dude that he's going to have a really good, coherent plan in place to deal with whether it's 4 weeks or 6 weeks. If it has to be speed install because they got robbed of all of their spring practices and don't get an extra 2 weeks, he's gonna do his best to make that work with what he has. It is a disadvantage that you have to deal with this in your very first year, obviously. But I think if you had a coach, he's the right coach to deal with something like this.
So you've seen both seasons all the way through? Succession?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm about to wrap up season 2. I think I'm on episode 9. I could have binged them, but it's like my nightcap. I like the show.
It's weird that you'd watch like that. Like, you've been watching it for 2 weeks.
I'm disciplined, man. I'm disciplined.
You are. It's crazy. I didn't know people still did that. Like, it's almost like you're in the 80s just watching it week by week. You're having to stay, like, watching Lost on ABC. Like, it's just, you don't want to ruin anything. Like, I don't understand how you see the end of one of the shows and it's got a cliffhanger. You're like, man, what are they going to do about that? Well, and then you don't just hit play next episode. It starts playing for you.
It does. Well, because I'm usually watching at like 1 in the morning, 1:30, and it's like 2:30. I'm like, probably about time to shut this down, get in bed. So
right.
Again, I'm disciplined.
Sure.
I know.
Yeah, you are, man. You are.
I know my vices. I know how to avoid them and stuff. I do wonder, like, obviously I'll see how the way the season 2 ends. I was reading something on Esquire magazine about the fact that, like, they talk about, like, it's a big show in media circles and finance circles. Like, if my buddy lives in New York City, Manhattan, Mike loves the show. People who work in media love it, but the show really doesn't draw that great of ratings. Like Little Big Lies or whatever they have on HBO, like that precedes it or usually would run in that time slot, had like 5 million viewers. I think Succession had like 2.5 or something like that. But I like the show.
I think it'll grow. I think the positive word of mouth will make like season. I think people can watch it like you watch it. Yeah. And then by season 3, I think those numbers will go up maybe by like 1 million a million average for the season. You know what I mean? Because I think everybody, especially during these last 3 months, have been binging all these shows they've been told about incessantly by their friends forever. You got to watch that. You got to watch that. Right. So now everybody's watched everything. So when they come back to real TV, whenever they can start shooting these shows again, don't you think that'll add another million to their viewership at least? Yeah, kind of happened with Game of Thrones too. Like people just heard about it for so long. They're like, you know what? Fine. I'll jump in. I'll start watching.
Right. No, the story did actually point out that I think like the season 2 premiere had like a 30% bump over the season 1 premiere, but still it wasn't kind of I just wonder like how many seasons are actually going to be able to keep, this thing going. But again, I haven't seen how season 2 ends. Man, it's called Succession. Like we get it. Like the one guy's tried, it's not going to work. Yeah. The other guy is not a viable option at all. And this is the thing about like cinema and television. Like they're actors. That's not who they are. That's not who Kieran Culkin is. But he is such a good little SOB. Like I hate the guy. If I saw him in real life, I'd be like, get away from me. Like you're such a punk. Right. But it's just an actor, Aslan. It's not real life, man. Get over it. It's going to be okay.
If I've always felt bad for in that regard is the guy that played Vinny Chase. Was it Vinny on Entourage?
Vinny Chase. That's right. Adrian Grenier.
So like in that show, he is like on the level of like DiCaprio. Like he is a huge star in that show. And he's got all this, he lives that life. He's like a DiCaprio or a Brad Pitt or somebody like that, even like a Channing Tatum, I don't know. Ooh, but in real life, he's just like a B- actor.
Yeah.
But I think when people see him like in the street, they think he has that life. Like, oh, there's Vinny Chase, man. Oh, you were great in Aquaman. It's like, nah, man. That guy's been in. What's he been in the last 6 years? Does he still act?
No,
but he was a huge star in that one show where he played a star.
Right.
But in real life, he's just kind of if he's in a movie, he's probably the 7th on the call sheet. Like he's just not a big star. But in that movie, he played a big star. Right, or in that show, he played a big star. I always thought that was a weird dynamic for him to not be nearly the biggest star as the guy he played.
Like, is it an insult? Like, hey, you're not a good actor, but we're going to show your great range by you're going to play a star actor in our show because you're so far removed from being this big of a deal. I actually watched that entire show start to finish when it first came out. I loved it. I lived on the edge. I lived, on the seat or the edge of my seat every Sunday waiting for that show to drop. And for some reason, I was bored the other day. I watched the series finale. It is amazing how much stuff they would cram into like a 22-minute show. It's almost to the point that it was ridiculous. We're like, all right, his career's over. He lost it. They're not going to get funding for this. E got dumped by his girl. Johnny's never going to be able to get back on TV. And then like within 19 minutes, like E gets the girl back. Some angel investor, funds and bankrolls everything, and then Johnny ends up landing like a recurring role in some show. It's like, and I don't know, like happy endings to me are so trite.
Oh, I hated it.
But
the only thing that made that
show, I liked
to me,
it though. I loved it.
Oh, I hate it. I love the first 2 seasons, but the thing that was so relatable to that show, I think everybody that has a group of friends, especially guys, obviously, because it was centered around 4 guys, is like, okay, the 4 closest friends you have, if one of them became a huge star,
yeah,
what would our roles be?
right.
And would we be a Turtle? Would we be an Eric? Would we be Johnny? Like who would be that? We'd all be hangers on, but to what degree?
Yeah.
And that to me is what made the show interesting. It was like Turtle and Eric are all living this superstar life when they're nobodies.
Yeah.
And they're just like succubuses. They just sucked on to this star and happened to be really good friends with him when he was younger, and they get to live that life like Mark Wahlberg's buddies. They don't go and start billion-dollar tequila companies and become managers for other actors or become another huge star on a TV show. That to me, that's when it lost. Is like, man, I like to see Turtle as just kind of a
driver. You're a driver. Say you're lane driver.
Certainly no initiative. Like I love that they didn't seem to have any initiative. They just got all the trappings that came with Vinny's fame.
No,
but no,
he's got
they had to make them all likable.
He's dating Meadow Soprano. It's like, in what world does the driver of Leonardo DiCaprio date Margot Robbie?
And like they'd walk into a restaurant or they'd walk into a bar and everybody like, hey, what's up, E? Good to see E. Man, you don't know Mark Wahlberg's best friend from high school. You don't know his nickname. Why do you know him? He's nobody. I just liked it better when they were nobodies. By the way, I looked up that guy. He's been after Entourage. He was in Sex, Death, and Bowling.
Oh, yeah.
Trash Fire, Marauders, Arsenal, Affairs of State.
Literally, I've heard none of these. Never.
Christmas at Graceland, Home for the Holidays, Stage Mother, and then this year he was in a short called Freeze.
Well, that's good. It's been a tough year to find work. Good for him.
Well, I mean, and he's still acting. He's still making money, but I just think people see him and confuse him with his character that he's this huge star.
Right.
And he's like, no, man, I don't ride in limos. In fact, if you want to go get a meal with me, he's not DiCaprio. So, by the way, so going back to Florida State football, that's probably why people tuned in. So they got two commitments, right? And the kid from Mississippi State.
Oh, did it happen? The Mississippi? Oh, yeah. Well, Fabian. I thought you were talking about the other kid. From
No,
but
the Fabian kid actually signed.
Yeah,
right?
Fabian Lovett, defensive tackle, did. That was kind of in limbo, I thought, because he went dark on social media. Like he even deleted his tweet that was saying that he committed to Florida State, and it was like, oh boy, because I mean that's when you're a transfer, like it's all non-binding until you sign your letter, which he did. Yeah, so yeah, they got 3 guys in tow. Michael Langston breaks it all down. Come up here in a minute.
Well, yeah, but we wanted to give people a little teaser of what he's going to be breaking down. So yeah, the three. I mean, that's not a bad weekend.
No,
you put more dudes on the roster. It's all never a bad thing.
3-star recruits, though.
Well,
probably
right. Look, hey,
just saying.
You know what? Better than 2-star recruits.
Yeah,
right.
I did notice that one of the standouts that they had on the roster here the last few years, Kenneth Gainwell, is actually from Yazoo City in Mississippi, which was kind of like my neck of the woods when I was living out there. So not really a great powerhouse program. Fletcher Cox, who's in the NFL, who's really good, played ball there. I mean, like once every 2 or 3 years, they generate like a pretty decent Division I football player, but kind of goes to show. And again, there's Southern Miss, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss are all in that state. So either they all didn't recruit that kid, which I assume is the case as he ended up at Memphis. But it kind of goes to show good evaluation skills, which is supremely important. Something Jimbo had in spades in the beginning and lost it for some reason, which I don't know how you would lose that. But I think even Warren Buffett sometimes misses on stocks. But, yeah, so as long as he can evaluate good, who cares about the star rankings? But
and I'm telling you, especially right now when there's nothing really to evaluate, like you don't get to see these kids in person, you better be good at it. This is kind of separate the good evaluators from the not so good evaluators, because you've got to know what you're looking for. You've got to have specifics, and they've got to match it. But you don't get to see them in person, not nearly as much as you normally would. So you've really got to be able to identify what you want on tape, and you've got to be sure that if you're like, hey, I don't want a receiver under. Not that anybody should be like this. But how tall is he? Is he 5'10" or is he 6'1"? Because that is a difference. And trust the people that are giving you those numbers, because you don't get to measure them yourself, at least not right now. You got to hope that they've been on campus or will be on campus. But If you can trust your evaluators and trust your own eye and what you see, you got a huge leg up on people that aren't that good at it. Because there's a lot of different factors to coaching. Evaluating high school talent and who belongs on your roster, who fits in your roster, might just be the most important one. So hopefully Norvell's really good at that. He was good at it at Memphis for sure.
Also, I watched Top Gun for the first time this weekend. I have really nothing else of substance to add, but I finally did watch it, so I feel like I'm more American, more of a man, things of that nature. So
yeah, you texted that to Ira and I was so flabbergasted I didn't even respond. That's crazy that you had never seen it. It's on TV all the time. You were never just like curious, like, hey, what's all the fuss about?
I don't think I ever really saw it pop up or it'd be on cable, and I'm like, I should watch this unedited.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question then. That's good because
let's go. I got to go. I want to edit this before we
hold on. I want to ask you this. I've talked because it's been a part of my life now for 30 years. I saw it in 1986 or whenever it came out. I haven't talked to anybody who just saw it recently since the mid 80s.
Right. Okay.
So what did you think about the plot? What did you think about the acting? Because now that I look back on it, it still has a special place in my heart because I was 11 when I saw it and the soundtrack and everything.
Oh, yeah.
But it is a pretty ridiculous movie.
Yeah.
Is it not?
Well, my friend said it the best, really. He said, just think about how awesome movies from the 80s were because they still hold up this long. He's like, can you imagine in 1986 watching a movie that was 30 years old? And it's like it would not hold up the way like Top Gun holds up today. I think the plot, yeah, it's got some of that 80s schmaltz to it, obviously, but it almost felt a little like I thought the whole thing revolved around Top Gun. Like, you got to be number one guy, but then, his redemption story hinges off saving, the free world. So I guess that's a bigger deal than winning the actual thing. And then the whole, him and Val Kilmer at the end, I'll be your wingman. Yeah, right. I'll let you be mine. That's really, really clever, I think. No, I mean, it wasn't cheesy, and it wasn't like Saved by the Bell cringe. It's held up pretty well. I mean, the cinematography, but like the action scenes, you keep seeing all these jets, these MiGs, like flying through the air and diving, and it's like, wow, like this thing's pretty impressive. I think it's pretty good. It held up quite well, I think.
I just don't like that Kelly McGillis, the ethical lines that she crossed.
Yeah.
By dating one of her students. We can't have that. Not in the military, not anywhere.
Yeah.
That's one of your students, and you're a civilian. But yeah, I like look, there's 1,000 things, but the one thing that I always do is anytime I hear Doc on the Bay, no matter who I'm around, if we're in a bar or if I'm just sitting with Stephanie or with Brady, and I hear Doc on the Bay, I'll just go, this music, and I'll do it that little, and then I remember Shanna, this was funny, Stephanie's not going to want to hear this, but the first time I said it to Shanna, I said, oh, this music. And she goes, oh, an old friend? Because that's the line in the movie. And it really made me laugh. And, we were happily ever after for about 12 or 15 years. But yeah, I just, anytime I hear Doc on the Bay, I do this music. My mom, she'd call down and have me play it over and over and over again. And what's weird about it is he says this music. He doesn't say this song.
Right.
Which leads me to believe that they didn't know if they were going to get the rights to the song.
Yep.
Until almost right when they were releasing the movie. So that always makes me laugh thinking any time I hear Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, which is a travesty considering who actually wrote it and how awesome Otis Redding was. And that instead of thinking about him and his wonderful, way too short career, I think about stupid Maverick in Charlie's living room talking about his mom being sad. But hey, that's what movies do to us.
That is what they do to us. All right, enough of the media synopsis, sprinkling a little bit of stuff to make the show nice and hearty. Michael Langston coming up, discussing recruiting right after this. What's up, everybody? I'm Aslan Hajavandi. He is Michael Langston, recruiting analyst for WarChant.com, the ultimate Seminole sports source. Use the promo code 30 for 3 days of access to the website. Michael, when we bring you on, obviously we're talking about recruiting because that's your thing. Florida State ended their week this previous week on quite the bang, getting not one but two recruits on both sides of the ball, both at positions of need, I guess you could say. Let's start with the more recent of the two recruits, or the commitments rather. Let's talk about Jordan Eubanks out of the Lone Star State of Texas, a guy that you project probably will play linebacker. How was the staff able to secure a commitment from a kid in the state of Texas, and what do you kind of see from him and expect that he'll bring to this program?
Right. He's a guy that that they had been working on for a little bit, as far as they offered him in, I believe, March. But even before then, they were evaluating. This gave them a chance to, fully evaluate Jordan. I think Coach Norwell was very excited about him. Coach Fuller was really thought the fit was everything that they're looking for. He's a guy that's kind of rose up the as far as in the recruiting circles went. I think he picked up like 14 offers in the last month. So he's got over 20 offers now. So he was a guy that his stock was rising. I think his stock will continue to rise. Where you're looking at, more than likely a 4-star prospect when everything shakes down, when people get a chance to see this guy consistently. He's a striker at the safety position or hybrid position, can play outside linebacker, which I think that's where he'll match up with the FSU. What I love is just his instincts around the football, can just explode through his tackles and, cause turnovers and just cause a lot of creative havoc. Jordan had told me that he's more than likely going to play, the hybrid position or the boundary safety, and mostly with outside linebacker. I think that's where kind of FSU envisions him, outside linebacker, guy that blitzes, guy that can cover running backs and tight ends. I think, that's where, FSU looks at him. Chris Thompson, obviously from the state of Texas, kind of got their foot in the door with that at first. Then Chris Marv quickly jumped in, and that was like probably early this year but Jordan had told me he's got a really good relationship with Marv and really hyped up that relationship. And then also Mike Norvell is from, born and raised in Dallas, Texas. So he knows that area, knows people, there's knows connections. So I think obviously the state of Texas is going to be a place that they really rack up. Obviously, I think they got Hunter Washington already this year, a 4-star cornerback, or defensive back. So I think they're going to hit Texas hard, and I think this is only just the start of guys that they're trying to push for in the state of Texas. But when you look at what this kid's game is, he fits exactly the type of players that Adam Fuller wants, as far as hybrid and can do multiple things, not just outside linebacker and, run around and tackle people, but a guy that can cover people, a guy that you can put in multiple situations.
Right on. All right. Well, we can also look at the offensive side of the ball for some guys that are, I don't want to say hybrid, but at least dynamic athletes, at least out on the perimeter. And things started for Florida State on Friday with the commitment of Joshua Burrell out of the state of South Carolina. We talked about him a little bit, but obviously, I guess, catch some people up on how Florida State was able to bring him into the fold and in his game. And listen, I know, again, that it's important for these kids to get on campus and to visit. He's one of the guys that was able to get on campus before the pandemic kind of took grip of the entire nation. But, I mean, just not only to have him on campus, but to be able to keep that relationship going despite the fact that, we got to deal with everything we're dealing with, quiet period, things like that. I mean, that's got to say a pretty good bit about this staff to be able to maintain that relationship throughout the ups and downs of what's going on in the larger world.
Right, and that's kind of what I've alluded to several times, in different times we talked to Aslam, is just they're going to win kids that when they get the relationships, they feel like they can beat anybody. And this is one of those situations where they really developed a relationship with this kid in Joshua Burrell, and they didn't let up, and then they really showed what makes their program special about what they're going to do and how they're going to do things, and their dedication to helping you as a person, in developing you as a person, not just developing you as a player. And it's just a different thing than a lot of other schools. And, as far as how they handle things, it's very personable. It's very the players, the recruits feel like it's more than just football when these coaches are recruiting them, because they're talking about personal stuff that they don't talk about anything. So I think that was a big thing with Joshua, but also a big thing too, the fit into this offense. He's a big physical receiver, gets his separation because of physicality. The kid catches everything. I mean, he's got hands like I think Kenny Dillingham said he's got massive bare hands as far as when you watch him. He just snags everything, and the way he snatches the ball out of the air and just the one-handed catch is really jumped out to me when I really started studying Joshua's game. And I think the big thing is FSU made him such a priority both on and off the field that it didn't really matter when he decided. He's like, you know what, I might as well decide now because there's no other visit or no other offer that's really going to change my mind as far as what I like and what stands out to me. So I think the relationships, they really hammer those down. Kenny Dillingham did a tremendous job. I actually did a Q&A with Joshua the other day on Saturday, which was pretty fun. And before I started, Joshua said, "Hey, Mike, I watched you and Aslan's video of me in the YouTube breakdown. You were spot on." So apparently Joshua conversed that, the strengths and the weaknesses that we pointed out on his, game as far as FSU getting the commitment was very good. Like I said, not a burner, but a guy that gets separation with physicality. And you need those type of receivers in this kind of offense. So Joshua gave this stamp of approval there. But we just talked, and, you could tell there was such a personal relationship with Dillingham. There was certainly a personal relationship with Coach Dugans that his connection with the staff as a whole felt like he was already within the program. So I think this is probably a commitment that's been done for a while.
All right, Michael. So, unfortunately, I read YouTube sometimes, which, no offense to you people posting on YouTube, but sometimes you got some really flaming hot takes that might not be, well seasoned, but they're hot. But, you got to get some seasoning on the takes. Yeah. Both of these prospects, and I think maybe Burrell's case is maybe a little bit more relevant, but, some people point out, obviously, they look at the stars. With a guy like Burrell, I think they say that maybe his stock is slipping. I mean, what would you say to people that are cynical, that are hung up on things like stars and might, postulate or theorize that a guy like Burrell's stock is slipping for whatever reason? Really sharp kid, by the way. I think he's got like over a 4.0 GPA. I mean, right. So that'll help.
Yeah, I don't pay a lot of attention. And I'll be honest, I know what I work for. I know I work for War Chant. I know I cover recruiting. But I've told people this from the start. I never pay attention to what the Rivals ranking is or what any star ranking is for a kid. I focus on, I get the game film. I really study what I see. Can this guy fit into what FSU does? Is this guy an explosive layer that can be developed at FSU? And that's what I look for. I don't really focus on, the stock and, people dropping. I mean, the thing is like when you start the season, these stocks fluctuate. They go up and down with these kids. Obviously, when kids are getting tons of offers like, Joshua Burrell that already has the amount of offers he has and the amount of attention he has, it's nice. But the most important thing for me when I look at these guys is I have to do my job. I'm going to look and study what film I see. What do I see that's weaknesses? What do I see that's strengths? Whether that's Eubanks or Burrell, I look at the strengths and weaknesses. Plus, I want to see how they fit into what FSU is going to do. Do I see this guy really emerging in this kind of system with what FSU is going to run based on what I've seen, what Coach Adam Fuller is going to do on defense, and then based on what I've seen Coach Dillingham do on offense? When you watch those things and you break all the film down, you see the characteristics of why they like these guys and what stands out of these guys and how I feel these guys are going to excel in this offense. I know people get hung up on the 3 stars and stuff like that, but as I told you before, it's freaking May, guys, with the rankings. These rankings change fluidly, consistently, almost to a monthly pattern where people get to see more of these prospects in person. People get to see more of these guys, how they develop, because each kid develops, changes every year. There's going to be a higher upside to what their game is from a junior to a senior year. So I think you're going to see that, and we've seen that many a times happen. So I wouldn't get caught up on the rankings in May because it's just a start of rankings. This is basically a platform of, okay, this is what our opinion is of what we see in this kid right now. But it's going to change. It always does.
All right, Michael. Well, then with 2 commitments and, one day and then a weekend to maybe, make some phone calls or, do what you can in these limited opportunities. What lies ahead for Florida State? And I guess what do you got cooking for us on warchant.com coming up this week?
Well, I think there's a good chance they're going to have some good news on Monday with tight end Jackson West and announces his decision. I think there's several guys still that possibly could, pop out later on, like Destin Pazon, a wide receiver out of Louisiana, tight end Michael Trigg. Obviously, defensive back Cameron Graves is another one, to watch. And then I'm monitoring heavily, believe it or not, another transfer in Jerrion Jones, a defensive back who stated that he's
I thought he was
enrolling.
going to Ole Miss.
Yeah, that's what everyone thought. But I've heard that it's not, the recruitment's not completely done. So I've heard that FSU is that he's reaching or he's talking to them in some capacity, but I don't know how much. But that's what I'm monitoring because I think something's going to happen either Sunday or Monday. So he's a guy that we're monitoring. Obviously, for people that have been under a rock, Fabian Lovett, defensive tackle, signed with FSU, which is basically a grant aid sign to take care of your schooling the first time when you get there, first month you get there. So he will be, looks like, enrolling at FSU. Now, when he enrolls, that'll make it official. That's how transfers work. It's more when guys enroll, then they're locked in. So that's kind of a thing, those kind of things I'm monitoring. Now, what I've told people, I kind of gave this vote, Aslan. I let people vote. I said, you either want a third batch of new targets or do you want a hot board? And unanimously, a lot of them want a full hot board. So I've been working on a full hot board. I just got finished with the offense. I'm not putting pressure on Ira to put it up either, but I just got finished with the offense. It's extensive. It's very detailed. I'm sure Ira's going to be kind of doing it like we did before, releasing it by positions, maybe a few positions together. So I'm working on I'm going to start working on the defense either both today and Monday, and hopefully get that done in the next few days. But we'll have a big hot board that covers, over 70 recruits. So there's going to be tons of stuff and tons of information in there. It's the most detailed thing that I do on WarChant when we do these hot boards because it takes a lot of time. It's time consuming, but it's also very informational, and it tells kind of where things are at. And then after that, I'm probably going to, start, thinking about, doing stuff on maybe some 22 prospects just to see how things are going. Not a hot board, but just kind of maybe level some guys to watch, for
some spring tour stops maybe for 2021. Right?
Yeah, it could be, but I'll start working on that and just, I'm trying to do different things that we haven't done before. Maybe do some features on, guys that have got offered, which ones, if I had to pick out of all the new offers, which one is the big one to watch or whatnot. But I'm getting feedback on you guys. So you guys are on WarChant. If you have a suggestion, you can post it on WarChant, tag me, and give me your thoughts. And, because we want to do what you guys want to see. We want to give you what the people want, right. And so just if you got a suggestion, either email me or put it on the site, and we'll see if we can get it done.
Michael Langston, man of the people, joining us here on this edition of WarChant TV, also going to be on Wake Up WarChant. So thanks so much for your time as always, Michael. Take care, man.
You got it.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.